Welcome to today's webinar session of using Oasys PRIMER's keyword editor for faster LS-DYNA design changes. My name is Yitong and I am an engineer in the Arab Birmingham office here in the UK. And joined by me today, we have David McLennan as well, another engineer in the Arab Birmingham office. So this webinar session is going to be a presentation, short presentation, followed by 2 exercises which you could just open up any models, simple models to follow along, try out different tips and tricks. So a little bit about the background of why we're running this webinar. So in the day-to-day sort of like design change, we normally need to make a lot of changes to parameters on not just one entity, but like a whole series of entities. For example, updating a bunch of shell thicknesses, offsetting them, so on and so forth. It can be quite time consuming if we were to update them one by one. But using the keyword editor alongside Oasys PRIMER's quick pick functions, we can very efficiently conduct these day-to-day model updates. So as mentioned before, this session will involve a live demonstration. I'll give you guys some time later on as well to just open up any simple models that you have so that we could follow along together. A little bit of motivation as well for using the keyword editor. So the keyword editor is accessible in almost all of the keywords in Oasys PRIMER. So for example, if you want to make changes to parts, sections, different entities such as shells, solids, beams, so on and so forth, you can always open up the keyword editor to do all of these functions. So some of the main functions that you can do in the keyword editor is, like I mentioned, making changes to many entities at once, or if you're wanting to move entities, a bunch of them across the different include files. At the same time, through the keyword editor, you could also use that to isolate certain entities on your current Oasys PRIMER screen too. So that's just the iceberg of what the keyword editor can do. And I'm going to follow along with more tips and tricks in the live demonstration. So before we jump into the actual exercise, just to give everyone a little bit of understanding of the terminologies of the keyword editor. So what I have on screen right now is a keyword editor for parts in a model. So I basically open up part and then keyword. So on orange there, you can see that's the suffix. So for example, if you want to add things like part inertias, part context, that's where you toggle that option on the suffix. You can see on the top right, there is a K. That's the keyword manual shortcut. So whenever you have any trouble, you need a little bit more help, pressing K on Oasys PRIMER will allow you to open up the keyword manual and link it to the particular page you're looking to easily. On red, you can see that's the acronym / the headers. So for example, in like a part, you have the PID, the section IDs, the material IDs, all of those will be at the headers. One thing you might not know about the acronym headers is that if you hover over them in the keyword editor, they give a little bit more explanation as well. So right below in blue, you have the entry row. So in our model, we have quite a few parts already available, but if you want to add like new parts into your model, this is where you do it through the entry row. And lastly, in green, we can see the data rows, and these are all of the available parts / entities currently in our model. So if you want to make any changes to existing parts in the model, it will be through the data rows here. So before we continue on with the session, just a bit of a notice as well. So I'm going to be demonstrating today's session using Oasys PRIMER 21.0. So in Oasys 21.0, some buttons have been reorganized in the Vis menu. Some new icons introduced and hover text also added. So if you're using, for example, an older version of Oasys PRIMER 20.0, the functionality should still be the same. So just a bit of like a awareness in case what I'm showing on the screen is a little bit different from what you see. So last thing before jumping into our demonstration session, we're going to be working on 2 exercises today. The first exercise is a geometry update. So when you have like a simple geometry, how can you quickly perform these updates easily? using formulas or like writing out certain things from the keyword editor. And the second exercise will be more on material updates. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up my Oasys Primer screen, and hopefully you can see. So the first exercise is going to be working with shell elements. So I'm going to give everyone around maybe 30 seconds just to open up like any models you have, any simple models with some shell elements that we could work on together. I'll proceed then. So don't worry if you're not able to follow along to each of these step-by-steps. Please feel free to put questions in the chat as mentioned, and at the same time, all of this will be posted on our YouTube channel later for your reference. So this is a simple extrusion, and that's normally we will have a lot of studies or design updates on parts like this. So if I go down here and change from time step to shell thickness, and I press SI to visualize the shell thickness, you can see that this extrusion has a constant shell thickness of 2 mil. And that is because if I edit the part, and then if I edit the section ID, you can see that the thickness through all of the nodes is essentially 2 mil. That's what we see on screen right now. So certain times, we might want the shell elements through one part to quote different thicknesses. For example, in this case, maybe I want the back wall over here to be 3 mil instead of 2 mil. So what we can do as well is we can introduce thicknesses to the particular entities so that if that happens, this would trump the section ID card of your part, and it will only read the shell element thickness. So again, as a study right now, let's try to change all of these back wall elements to 3 mil instead of 2 mil. And we can use the keyword editor to do that efficiently. So we want to be updating our shells. So I'm going to go into element, shell over here. And of course, I want to be opening up my keyword editor. So I'm going to press keyword. So I'm going to extend this a little bit larger as well so that everyone can see this a little bit clearer. So when you open up the keyword editor for shells, this instantly shows all of the shell elements in your current model. So just like a quick hint, if you're unaware of this, if I press my left mouse click on, for example, down, this goes down one by one. But what happens when I press my middle mouse click button is that it will now go down by tens, so 28, 38, 48. And if I right mouse click it, it goes down by 100. So 148, 248, and 348. So this helps you navigate through your keyword editor a little bit easier. So as mentioned, we only want to make changes to particular shell elements in this model right now. So what I want is to get these particular shell elements into the screen. So to select those, I could press Options and then go into Select. Then I want to use this because I want to select it based on what's currently on the screen. And how I'm going to select these elements efficiently is I'm going to use a feature line selection of maybe an angle of 10 degrees so that everything within the 10-degree angle will be selected. So for example, if I press this, this, and this, then you can see that all of these shells are selected together. So you can quickly select multiple entities at once using the this option. And once I'm happy with all of this, I'll press Apply. So all of these changes are still not yet reflected into our keyword editor. What we need to do is if you press Options once more, you can see that now there's a lot more options that we can toggle on. So what I want in my keyword editor menu right now is I want what I only selected. So if I press only selected, now my keyword editor only shows the shell elements that I've selected just now. If you're still a little bit uncertain of whether these are the right elements that you've selected, what you could do is you can press Options and then you can press Sketch Selected. Then you can see and verify that, okay, these are all the elements that I actually want to update. So now that we have all of our elements, we can proceed to the next step. So we mentioned that we want to give particular thicknesses to these shell elements, and that can be toggled on by a suffix. So right now, all of these shell elements have no suffixes for them. But now if I press arrow, I can toggle on the thickness option. And before I do that, I just wanted to clarify as well that you can see that all of these data rows are now in blue. All of these in blue basically means that when you make changes to one of these elements, you will also make the same changes to all of the other elements. So if you want to unhighlight all of this, you could also go back to options and then press unselect all. Because I want to make changes to all of these at once, I'm happy with my current setup. So again, I'm going to introduce like a thickness to them. So when I press thickness, all of them will have the thickness option turned on. And now I'm going to give all of them a 3 mil thickness at all of the 4 nodes. So once I make one change, press enter, it reflects to all of the other columns. I'm going to do the same for all 3 of these other columns. Now, once I'm happy with all of this, I'm going to press update. So now this has been updated. And if I press SI now, you can see that these back walls are 3 mil thick. So that's going to be very helpful if you're making small day-to-day changes or studies. If you're unhappy with what you've done, if you made some mistake in the middle of this, what you could do is you could also press the undo button at the top, and that reverts it back to 2 mil before you made the change. So I'm going to go back to shader view to show some other stuff. So in here, in this model, I have a parameter defined. For example, if I go to param, I press modify, I have a parameter defined called thick, and this quotes a value of 5. So sometimes parameter can be useful because you can put it in the top of the file, and then you can make changes of the parameters easily through a text editor, for example. So that's when some people might choose to use parameters. So over here, what if I want to quote all of my shell elements here with a parameter? I could also do that. So if I go back to shell and I go to keyword now, so instead of selecting it based on the visualize tool, I can select my shell elements through a different way now. So remember at this column over here, it's a suffix column. So if I press Auto here, you can see that now in my keyword editor, it's actually showing all of the elements which has no suffix and also all those elements with thickness suffix. So we know that the only elements with thickness suffix are those in the back wall. So if I just untick none, you can see that this instantly shows all of the elements that I've just made changes to. So if I press options and then I press select all, now you can see that if I press right click and only, these gets the right elements that I've just worked on just now. So I'm going to press U on my keyboard again to get everything back up on the view. So I'm going to put thickness 1 as the thickness quoted in my parameter. So I can do that by using N and then thick. So now you can see that if I hover my mouse over here, in node 1 of all of these shell elements, it quotes a 5 mil thickness. You can imagine that in your keyword editor, if there are a lot of different parameters, it might be very hard for you to always visualize it by hovering your mouse over it. But what you can do as well is you can press the P button on the top, because now when you press the P button, then it shows all of the values of it instead of its parameter form. So this could be a better way of visualizing what you have on screen. If I press P again, then you can see it goes back to the parameters. So that's one of the tips and tricks to introduce. Another thing that people might not be aware of is, for example, sometimes in your design studies, you might want to adjust, for example, a shell thickness, increase its thickness by 20%. So then what you would do is that instead of 3, from the keyword editor, you can straight away press equals 3 multiplied by 1.2. Then you can see that all of the rows over here now quotes 3.6, which is 3 multiplied by 1.2. So this is a way that you can put formulas directly into your keyword editor. So I'm going to go to options and then unselect all first. So you notice that when I made changes, for example, 3 times 1.2, this is the same, this reflects onto all of the other rows. So I'm going to show a demonstration now. If I change, for example, node 2 and 3 to 2, then what's going to happen? So if I go select all again, and the same thing here. So if I go to equals 2 multiplied by 1.2, you can see that even though this is 3, it gets updated by the row that I was editing, which is not really what we want sometimes. So what we could do, for example, is I could also press equals, and then instead of quoting the number, I'll quote thickness 4. So equals thick 4 multiplied by 1.2. And now you can see that all of the rows get reflected based on the original value that they had. So it could be quite a powerful tool at times. So some other things to showcase. In the keyword editor, for example, let's say you have this extrusion and you want to bring out all of its coordinates so that you could bring it to an external software, for example, to do more comparisons of the position of it. We could also write out these data efficiently through the keyword editor. For example, in this extrusion, if I wanted to get all the coordinates of all of the nodes of this extrusion, I could go to node, then again, go to the keyword editor. So I'm going to use the visualize tool to help us again. So if I go to options and I select, so I could just use quick pick to instantly select all of these, and that gets all of them into my keyword editor if I press apply. Again, I have to press options and only select it to get all of the entities that I selected onto the screen only. So if I want to write down all of these coordinates into a CSV file, I can do that directly through a keyword editor as well. So if I press right click, I could go to export file, and this will essentially export all of the files that you have into a CSV format, or even a keyword file if you want. Um, I won't press save now because I have it saved out in a format that we can have a look at together. So if I open up the CSV file that I saved out, you can see that now all of these nodal coordinates have been saved out with their X, Y, and Z coordinates. So it could be helpful for any other post-processing. Besides that, just a note as well, if I unselect all again, some people might find it better to edit stuff using the text editor. So what you could do as well is if I press 2 and then I shift and press 8, so that selects everything in between as well. I could press right click again, and then I can just open up the text editor directly from the keyword editor, so in case you were unaware of that. So then you can make any changes you want to the text editor here. And then once you close it, these changes would instantly be reflected into your model as well. One last thing to show from here is that, for example, sometimes you might want to change certain, for example, the back wall over here. If you want to move the wall by a bit, you could use like an element offset function as well, so that you don't have to remesh the mesh again from scratch. So for example, again, I'm going to go to shell, keyword, and then I'm going to select all of the elements that I have over here. I can go to auto, and then again, untoggle none, so that it's all only the thickness ones. So options, and then I select all. So I could also add like a offset function. So if I go to maybe I will go to a cut section first because that would visualize it better. And I'm gonna put a Y cut section, maybe through somewhere here. And I'm gonna give a view. So the view 3, so that now we can see that the elements that we've selected are over here and also over here. So I could also toggle on shell offset. Then now, oh, sorry, that was a mistake. So if I want to introduce like an offset, I shouldn't have done it here. I should have pressed offset over here, so that instead of none, I'm toggling on like an offset for all of my shell elements. So if I press offset, now you will see an extra column where you can add an offset to your elements. So I'm going to add, for example, an offset of 1 mil. And if I update, you can see this very quickly on the screen. everything has been shifted by 1 mil. So this can be useful as well if you're making small changes without requiring you to remesh the whole part. So that's the end of exercise 1. So this is through the looking at shells, nodes in general. Next, I'm gonna open up a model which essentially has a series of materials in it. So again, I'm gonna give everyone a maybe 30 seconds, open up another model where you have a list of materials, for example, over here, so that we can work on this together. Hopefully everyone has like a model they're happy with on their screen right now. So again, since we're working on the keyword editor, I'm gonna open up the keyword editor right now. The first thing that we all will realize is that you can imagine that in my model, I have a lot of different types of materials. And with different materials, they will have different properties, different suffixes, so on and so forth. And that might make your material keyword editor very, very packed. And it's not quite a good way to visualize things or make changes to things. For example, if you're only going to be visualizing or changing the density, you don't actually need all of these cards. So what you could do as well is that keyword format at the top essentially shows all of the lines as different keywords, but you could put everything into a single format. And that makes it a little bit tidier because you could now see all of the different materials easily. As I mentioned, we're only going to be working on, for example, making changes to densities potentially, which is on keyword number 2. So I don't actually need all of the other keywords. What you could do is you could press all of these buttons on the top to hide different rows. So for example, if I press 3, that hides 3, 4, 5, hiding everything else that I don't need. And now our keyword editor is even more concise, making it easier for us to make changes. So in Primer, Oasys Primer 21, we also have a new function that allows us to auto-fit our columns. So for example, I could press auto-fit now, and you can see that everything is arranged better. The titles, you can see everything again, and that makes it a better format for us to make any changes. You could also reset the columns to go back to how it is. You could double click on the suffixes or on the titles, just like in the Excel spreadsheet, so that it auto scales it. You could drag it around as well, but I'm gonna put it as auto fit so that we can see everything clearly. So some other tips and tricks. If you, for example, if I want to visualize certain types of materials, you can see that the material types are all really quite messy, not in a very ascending kind of order. I could press suffixes, and that allows me to arrange them in ascending order from 1 to 3 to 20 and so forth. Or if I want to arrange them by material ID, I can also do that. Press MID and it arranges it accordingly. So again, I'm going to press suffixes to go back to what I previously had. So this can be quite helpful in terms of like getting certain things on the screen. For example, if I want to quickly visualize what are the MAT24 elements or parts that I have on my screen, what I can do is I arrange them accordingly. I left mouse click on 4, hold shift, and then press the last 24, which is over here. And then if I right click and press only, you can see that now on my screen, it only shows the materials, which is quoting a MAT24. And that's quite useful for us to quickly visualize things or check what we have in our model. Or for example, if I want to, I'm going to press unselect all first. If I want to see perhaps the material, so that I could filter it by density. So if I press here, now it filters my material by densities. So if I want to get, for example, all of this material with this particular density, I can press and then shift, left mouse click again, and right click only. That gets the relevant materials onto the screen. I can press R on my screen to reverse the view to see what wasn't quoted. So now we talked about how to arrange things, how we can visualize things clearly. I'm also going to teach everyone how to move different things into different include files. For example, let's say like all of these materials that I have on my screen, I want to move it to another include file. So instead of dragging them one by one, I could do all of them quickly through the keyword editor. So the include files are over here. So if I press left click on my mouse, I could press and then move it to a different include file. For example, I can move it to the body in white. So before I press apply, you can see that there's two options over here. One is called material only, and the other is find reference items. So in your material cards, they might contain other things such as like curves that you might be used in a material card. So if you press material only, what happens is that you have to be careful because these material IDs will be moved to the new include file, but the relevant curves won't actually be moved. And that's not always the case that you want. So if you want to move both of them together, you can press find reference items before pressing apply. And that helps you move everything, the material curves and the material keyword cards into the new include file and press apply. So you can see that once I press find reference items, it lets me choose to get the curves and the material, which I want both of them to move into a different include file. So I'll highlight take and then I'll press apply. You can see that now all of them have been moved into a new include file easily. So again, gonna unselect all. Some other tips and tricks is that every time you make changes to a keyword editor and then you press update, it's gonna go through like a list of checks before allowing you to confirm. And in a very large scale model, that might take a while. So you don't want to be making some changes in your keyword editor, pressing update and realize that, oh, I've made a mistake. So yeah, and then you have to do it again and then wait for a long time for it to check. So what you could do for the quick checks as well is because we know that we've only made changes to these entities over here, I could highlight them and right click and do a quick check so that the keyword editor checks all of these entities that you've changed first. And you can press next page, getting all of the errors, making sure you're happy with all of them before pressing updates. So I'm almost at the end of my session now, just a few more things to talk about. Close this. So we talked a lot about how we can use the keyword editor to get things onto the screen, but we can also do the same thing the reverse way. For example, I have these particular parts over here that perhaps I want to make changes to these materials. And then if I press R, these are the ones that I don't want to make changes. So I'll press R again and isolate all of the things I want to make changes with on the screen. So I could also get these in the keyword editor by using the quick pick menu. So for example, let's say I want materials. I want to get all of their materials onto a keyword editor. I can toggle this to material, use right click to drag a whole box across all of them. And through here, I can press keyword. That gets all of the materials that I've chosen onto a keyword file easily. So this is a reverse of what I've just said previously. And we're almost at our end of the session. And lastly, just wanted to give everyone some shortcuts as well, which might help with your day-to-day task. So again, if I press keyword, and I'm going to arrange this a little bit better. So hiding these rows again, and then auto-fitting my columns. So for example, this title over here is quite long. Let's say I have my mouse over here. So if you press Control A, it instantly selects the whole title. This is equivalent to if you left click on your mouse 3 times. So triple click, you can see that it selects the whole thing. If you use like a double click, it selects a particular word or string that you have. So double clicking will give you this. So some other things that you might find useful as well. Let's say my cursor is over here. If I press Shift and left and right, you can see that this highlights the things on the left and on the right. If you want to select the whole string to the left and right, you can press Shift, up, down. Okay, some other tips and tricks. If I press Control left and right, it goes instead of character by character, it goes through it by strings. So it allows me to toggle left and right much quicker. And lastly, if I hold Control Shift left and right, it highlights it as well. So I don't expect everyone to remember everything that I just said right here in terms of all of these shortcuts. So in your GoToWebinar session, you should probably see a handout section. And in that handout, I've put in some slides that shows summary of the shortcuts. So I also have it on screen right now. If anyone would like to take a screenshot or download the handout through GoToWebinar, and hopefully this will help you in your future day-to-day task. So I think that's the end of my session for now. And then let's see if we have any questions. So I've seen a few questions over here. The first one is, if I accidentally update the thickness of my shell, can I undo the process? So yes, as mentioned before, I think I've mentioned this just now, that if you made certain changes, you could always undo them from the top of your primer screen. And then a second question we have is, what's the difference between exporting files in keyword layout and single row layout? Is there any particular one that you recommend? Okay, I think this was when I was talking about exercise 1. So if I go back to model 1, and then I was exporting nodes. So if I select all of my nodes over here, then right click export file, there should be a keyword layout and a single row layout. So I actually have some examples that I can show you, but in terms of any ones that I recommend, there won't be some that I recommend because it depends on what you want to do in terms of post-processing. So you've seen the differences between arranging it in keyword layout and single row layout, maybe more evidently when we have materials. So material keyword, you can see the difference in terms of keyword format, where it arranges each keyword by different rows or single rows. Maybe I have this on my screen. So yes. So in terms of a keyword layout, it looks something like that, where you have all of your different cards arranged in different rows. And then this is, for example, one material, second material, and so on and so forth. Whereas in a single row layout, it looks something like this, where everything is in one single row, one material, second material, so on and so forth. So it depends on what people prefer in terms of post-processing. So sometimes you might find that single row layout works better because it allows you to hide different columns easily and so on and so forth when you're post-processing.
There's a couple more questions here, Yitong. Thanks for that. Someone's asking, why is Primer not creating a new part after changing the thickness of a few of the elements? So the elements will remain in the same part, but what will happen is if you've defined your element with the underscore thickness option, then those thicknesses will override whatever's in that part section card. So you'll end up with a part that's got some elements with some thickness and other elements with a different thickness, according to whether any of the elements in that part have the thickness option attached. So I think Yitong is just showing this now. So this is all the same part. You can see it's one color in Primer. It's one part. But then if we were to show the contours of shell thickness again, you can see that the green shells refer to the section card, which had the thickness of 2, and then the red shells are showing those elements that have the thickness option. So hopefully that explains what's going on there. But you could create a new part yourself with a new section card, and then this component on screen would be 2 parts rather than 1. But it essentially achieves the same thing. And there's one other question. Can I open the keyword editor for some entities whilst doing post-processing in D3plot? You can't do it directly, but if you were to open a linked session between D3plot and Primer, then you are able to open the keyword editor in the same way. You could select your entities within D3plot or Primer, and it would open the keyword editor in Primer if you wanted to check something or make an update ahead of a future analysis computation. And got a bit more time if anyone
David?
has any other questions. Don't see any at the moment, but we'll give it a minute. Hopefully you'll agree that was some useful tips and tricks in this webinar for using the keyword editor in Primer. I'll let Yitong close off the session.
Thanks, David. As David mentioned, like in terms of like questions as well, if you have any unanswered questions through the session or you think of something else afterwards, you could always like contact us. I'll show some details below. So these are all of our different websites and so on and so forth. So for example, over here, you could see that I've linked a faster LS-DYNA design changes using Oasys Primer's Part Replace Tool webinar. And that's something that you might consider useful because it also deals with like day-to-day tasks, being able to conduct them efficiently and quickly. So at the same time, just wanted to emphasize that Oasys Suite 21.1 is now out on our website. So we highly recommend everyone downloading that. And again, if you have any more unanswered questions, these are some of the email addresses that you can reach out to us by, and we will get back to you as promptly as we can. I think that summarizes it all for the webinar today. So thank you everyone for spending your time with us attending.